Good morning, hello, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening from. My name is Paula Gonzalez, and I am the Senior Manager of Membership Growth for AAPA. Welcome to today's webinar, How to Use Simulation to Address Today's Port Terminal Challenges, hosted by one of AAPA's newer members, CM Labs. Before we start, I want to point out that we have lots of exciting programs planned for this year. So if you are keen to learn about additional opportunities to connect and learn, please hang around for just a few minutes following the conclusion of today's presentation, as I will be happy to share with you some additional ways to engage, learn, and network over the next few months through AAPA. Since meeting in person has been difficult, AAPA added a new benefit for new members to allow them to host a webinar to present themselves to the members and showcase their expertise through thought leadership. So we are really excited to hear what CM Labs has to share with us today. If you are listening today and you are not a member and you would like an opportunity to present a webinar as a new member, as well as other opportunities to get in front of our port members and build relationships with them, I will be sharing my contact information at the end of this presentation. So we'll go ahead and get started. I am pleased to welcome one of our newer members and the moderator of today's webinar, David Clark of CM Labs. I'll go ahead and turn it over to David. David, the mic is yours.
Great, thank you very much, Paula, and good morning to our AAPA audience. Thank you for joining us today for our special webinar focused on using simulation to address today's port terminal challenges. And thank you to the American Association of Port Authorities for extending this invitation to CM Labs Simulations. My name is Dave Clark. I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager with CM Labs Simulations. I'm delighted to welcome you all here. If you're not on mute already, please go ahead and mute your audio to improve broadcast quality. Following today's discussion, which should last 25 to 30 minutes, we'll open the floor to questions and you'll be unmuted then, of course. Now, before I formally introduce our two guest panelists, I want to set the context for the questions I'll be asking today. There's one issue that's at the forefront of today's port terminal operations, and that's the global supply chain disruption we're currently experiencing and which experts are projecting to last for some time to come. Some analysts are projecting this to last years or even describing it as a new reality that will necessitate a fundamental change to the world's shipping infrastructure. Until that change is effected, however, we find ourselves in the midst of the great supply chain disruption with nearly 13% of the world's cargo shipping capacity tied up by delays in one form or another. In fact, in its latest update on global congestion, analysis firm Sea Intelligence reported that vessel schedule reliability has fallen once again, now at its lowest ever reliability level on record. No carrier recorded a year-to-year improvement in schedule reliability, with all but 4 carriers recording double-digit yearly declines. Now, the crisis is global, but the impact is felt at the port terminal level. Many ports are regularly breaking single-day activity records, and different terminals are taking different approaches to this challenge. Some terminals that typically operate during daylight hours are now looking at the option of 24/7 operations. Some are looking to expand in terms of berthing as well as storage. Others are simply stacking higher and maxing out their overflow storage capacity. What this all means is that there's currently an increased focus on operator readiness as well as resource management and overall terminal efficiency. Now, clearly, a simulator alone will not solve the global supply chain disruption, but they do position terminals to adapt by quickly delivering safe, efficient, well-trained operators. So my goal for today's discussion is to highlight the practical applications of simulation in a way that makes it easier for you to factor in your own business case, your own challenges, and your own requirements. Now, we will be throwing a lot of numbers at you over the course of today's webinar, but all attendees will receive a recording, of course, to the session, so you can play it back in case there's anything you miss. In addition, I'm pleased to be able to offer you an ebook that's in the attachments section of this webinar interface, and that's a document that summarizes a lot of the ground we're covering today. I'm going to structure today's interview in 2 parts. We're going to look at the why and the how much. First, why? Why simulation? How does simulation help in the context of today's supply chain disruptions? Second, how much? What are the numbers? How do you start making the business case for simulators? And in this context, there are no 2 better experts to provide advice than our guest panelists today, Mark Desmonds and Julien Richer-Lanciot. First, I'll introduce my colleague, Julien. Julien is CM Lab's product manager for training solutions. He has extensive experience in industry as both a mechanical engineer as well as an operator of heavy equipment. At CM Labs, he steers the development of innovative training solutions designed to promote safe, efficient, and effective port terminals, as well as work sites in a range of other industries. Welcome, Julien, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, David.
Now, it's my special pleasure to welcome our featured speaker, Mark Desmonds. Mark is the owner and founder of the Mark Crane Port Equipment Consultant Organization and the former director of equipment engineering for TIL. Mark was highly involved in the design and procurement of the Hadaram container terminal in Ashdod, Israel, and was responsible for the procurement of all equipment, including the remote operated STS and the fully automated ASC, including all software. He also participated in the early design stage and choice of operation and equipment selected for the Valencia Northport container terminal. The Mark Crane Port Equipment Consultant Organization, founded by Mark, is backed by 24 years of international experience in design, procurement, quality assurance and control, and maintenance and repair of port equipment. Services include assistance in performing smarter procurement, reflecting not only the price of the equipment, but also the total cost during the lifetime of the equipment. Other services include assistance in performing accurate ROI calculations for equipment, including operator assistance technologies such as DGPS, anti-sway, ship profiling, semi-automation, and full automation systems. Mark Crane also provides analysis of automation implementation, type of equipment, level of automation, TOC, and ROI. To round off Mark Crane's service offering, they provide complete analysis of the terminal, M&R process and strategy, asset management software, and parts procurement strategy. They also provide assistance with a variety of processes, including technical job description, candidate evaluation, M&R organization chart analysis, as well as the complete process for the selection, implementation, and follow-up with CMMS systems. Mark, a very warm welcome to you. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you, David.
Now, Julien, I'll kick off the interview by first just asking you to tell us what kind of simulation are we talking about? Can you frame this technology a bit for us?
Yeah, for sure. The good thing about simulation, it has greatly evolved in the last years. I don't know if you remember, not too far ago, simulation was mainly available for flight industry, very expensive training solution. But in the last years, we've seen a lot of evolution in the technology, and now it's getting more accessible. So if there is something maybe to remember about simulation for today is flexibility and scalability. Because on the same platform, you can have up to 20 pieces of equipment, depending if you train people on the key side, yard side, break bulk. So it's very flexible in that aspect and scalable. You also want to have a solution that can evolve with you and the technology. We talk a lot about SmartPort, all the technology available there. ROS as an example. You want to have a piece of hardware or a solution that can answer those training needs. So that's what solution like Smellers can offer to you. But before jumping in the adventure of simulation, I think it's important for you as a maybe future customer to ask yourself, what is really the application or the training needs you want out of this solution? Because Simulers, it's not only for training new operators, it's also for skills assessment, refinement of experienced operator, screening during interview, recruitment, when it's time to go at job fairs for recruiting next generation of operators. Marketing, it's something very useful also to demonstrate the cutting edge technology that your port or your organization can offer in terms of service. And maybe a new type of application is sustainability and reduce the environmental impact compared to the real piece of equipment. So that's all the aspect of simulation that can offer today. And again, very flexible and scalable. That's something I want to emphasize.
Thank you very much, Julien. So with that, I'll launch into my questions for our guest panelists. My first question is for Mark on the topic of why simulation. Now, obviously, in the context of today's pressures, one of our top concerns is the safety of operators, whether they're operating at night for the first time or in an unfamiliar environment. Mark, could you speak to the impact of simulation on safety considerations? How much safer are operators after they get out of the sim?
Yes, David. Well, we know that operators are safer following a simulator training rather than a standard training directly on equipment. following training on simulators, there is still a part of the training that has to be done on real equipment, but it's much shorter. So less chances for mistakes on real equipment to happen when there is a good simulator training session. Also, the new trainee can learn to operate with various environmental challenges such as snow, rain, fog, high winds, this type of situation, where he can learn the behavior of the crane and the suspended load that he's carrying, and then the simulator allows to make mistake because there is no real impact on equipment or on surroundings, and it's a much safer environment to learn by mistakes, which is an important part of training of operator. Now, it's very difficult to find data specifically on the improved safety by the use of simulator for training. I've done an extensive research in the last few months, but terminals are not really measuring this aspect. Terminals are aware that once they implement simulator training and training, but also retraining, they have an improved safety record on the terminals. But to pinpoint exactly which part comes from the terminal training, terminals don't yet measure that. So that's a discussion I've been having with some of them. It's an important factor that should be measured specifically, but at this time we don't. But what we know is that there are far less accident collisions involved with operators that have been trained via simulators than not.
Thank you, Mark. So my next question is for Julien, just to follow up on that a little bit. What are some of the technical considerations that potential buyers should evaluate in a simulator in order to make sure that they do, in fact, generate some of the safety benefits that Mark is referring to?
But there's no secret there. Whatever you do, brake ball to container management, you always want to have something close to the real piece of equipment. Because the operator, when they are trained on those simulators, machine behaviors becomes very important, the acceleration, etc. The controls, the type of control, because you want to train muscle memories, the position of the buttons, ergonomics, because if you operate, as an example, an STS or a reach stacker, you don't look in the same position. A straddle carrier, same thing. And another aspect we might sometimes don't look at or listen to is the sounds. Revolution of the engine, if it's a diesel engine, the electrical winch, the way it reacts, etc. So all those aspects are very important. But to achieve this, you need to have, again, something close to a real piece of equipment. And the way people do this in the industry, and that's the way also CM Labs, we do this, we work in close collaboration with OEMs to extract all those type of behaviors. And the other aspect, it's more at the training level. You want to have some open exercise, definitely focus on training to guide the operator, but also open to provide you that flexibility and creativity for the operators. You want them to test the limits of the envelope. As Mark said, if there is any mistake to happen, you want this to happen inside a simulator, not on the real piece of equipment. So you want this type of approach into your training curriculum. And also something scalable, because you are close to a real piece of equipment, you want something that can go slowly into ROS operations. Definitely their vibration is less important. It's more about what you see and the way you operate. And also semi-autonomous, how do you activate this mode, etc. All those aspects are very important. So you want to make sure your simulators can cover those things.
Fantastic. Thank you, Julien. Now, my next question is for Mark. Still on the topic of why simulation, we've examined operator safety. I want to take a look now at operator efficiency. Is there any evidence that an operator trained on a simulator is any more efficient than prior to the simulator training, as opposed to a trainee that has not used a simulator?
Yes, there is a clear evidence of an increased productivity by operators trained via simulators. The learning curve, in my experience, is 6 to 12 months faster to reach an acceptable level of productivity. It's difficult, it's always difficult to put a figure on a specific aspect in a terminal's productivity increase in general, as many factors come into account. then the numbers can vary greatly from one terminal to another, but it represents hundreds of thousands of dollars. That is for sure. The name of the game in our industry is ship in, ship out as fast as possible. So the faster you can service a vessel, the faster the vessel can then move on to its next voyage. Also, the faster we can receive another vessel at berth, which means increased throughput, increased capacity. Same thing, if we can move the container out of the terminal either on another vessel or via rail or truck at the gate, then the faster you can turn around this container, reduce your dwell time, then you're also increasing the capacity of your terminal, not only the throughput. So it represents hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on a terminal by simply gaining 1 moves per hour on equipment. We've done approximately 4 years ago, I had done an exercise on a large terminals in Belgium where 1 move per hour per shift, so per 8-hour shift for each operator represented 400 million euro at the end of the year. To give you an idea, and that was a terminal with a 5.5 million TEU capacity. So a large size terminal, but there are, so it is an important financial aspect to bring your operators to a productive level faster, and also to maintain them to that productive level by retraining, where you can go after that and pinpoint some aspect of the operation that needs improvement. So it's bringing them up there, but also keep them there, keep them at this productivity level.
Excellent, thank you. Now, Julia, I have another question for you. I kind of want to dig into the technical aspect of these things, because the benefits of safety and productivity don't simply materialize, right? There's something that is pertinent to the simulator itself. So I wonder if you can tell me about what goes into the creation of these simulators and how you can ensure that the skills that are learned in the sim actually transfer to the equipment on the terminal. We've spoken before about a kind of reverse engineering process. Maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, for sure. To have the simulator closest as possible to the real piece of equipment, you need to do a complete reverse engineering of the machine itself, the way it works, all the diagram, etc. So for this, we work with real equipment manufacturers, OEMs, also training institutions to understand how they train or are they manage their instructors, operators, around that. But during the reverse engineering process, we have access to the real machine CAD. So all the geometry, the position of the components, etc. is there. Also the mechanical properties. Is it steel, plastic, concrete? The deflection will becomes very important, the way the material reacts behind that. And we go even further with hydraulic system, mechanical or any electrical system. So the complete reverse engineering from A to Z is completed there. And at the end, we use equipment expert to do the final tuning of the machine, to play with the acceleration and small behaviors. We do the small tweak by doing this. And when we complete the whole process, it gives us the opportunity to extract more data from the simulation. So you really have something tangible and objective. Also, it's not just an opinion or a feeling about the operator's performance. You can really see the data at the end of the simulation, how many containers per hour, the engine load, etc. So everything like this is possible because of the process we address when we build those simulators. So simulation at the end, it's more than just muscle memory, motion cue. You learn more about operations and how to become more efficient also.
Thank you very much, Julia. Now I have one final question just on this dimension of why simulation, and the question is for Mark. Mark, what is your take on using simulators as part of the operator hiring process?
Before I answer this question, David, I just want to make a correction. Earlier I said 400 million euro and it's 400,000 euro. Correction I wanted to make per year.
10.
So to answer your question now, well, with the traditional training method, which was training in a classroom to try and determine who may have operators potential, then the training on real cranes in the terminal is costly and tedious. So the success rate is very limited, and once the terminal is operational, it is very difficult to have equipment available for training. So when you're building a new terminal, you can have the cranes available in the beginning because they're still not operational. But as soon as it becomes operational, then it's difficult to keep the equipment out of operation for training. And then we found that approximately 10% only of all candidates that perform the classroom training managed to qualify as an operator on complex cranes like the ship-to-shore. For yard equipment, it's up to maybe 25% of the classroom training that are found to be to have the ability to become a crane operator. Simulator training is an excellent tool for preliminary selection of potential operators. It allows to spend minimal time and cost on potential candidate. My experience is that we can clearly see within a 4-hour training session on simulator if the candidate has potential to go further or not in the operator's training for this type of equipment. This initial assessment stage is where you can select the operators with the best potential to reach top operators level. In a terminal where we were using sessions of 4 hours to understand if they were suitable for the position, only about 30% of the candidates successfully completed the assessment stage. And out of this 30% of the operators that move on to the next operator stage training, we have upwards of 90% of success with these operators. So it is a very important tool to limit the cost and time spent on potential operators that we realize down the road that they just don't have the ability that it takes to operate such equipment. So this allows us to make an appropriate selection of candidates to be sent in in-depth training and increase the success rate. And then in numbers, if we take 100 potential candidates in the old traditional method, 50 to 60 candidates would pass the theoretical classroom training. Of those, 25 to 30 candidates would pass the live crane training, and of those, 10 to 12 candidates would become productive crane operator, which is a 10 to 12% of the candidates at entry. Where with simulator method, we have 25 to 30% of the candidates, at entry that can become a successful crane operator. So this is a 2.5 to 3 times more in the success rate. There you go.
Thank you, Mark. We'll switch gears now and turn to the second segment of this interview, which examines the numbers and really how you would go about building a business case for simulators. My first question is for you, Julien. Can you help ground this discussion by talking about the costs associated with simulators? What ranges of magnitude are we talking about?
The range will really depend what type of solution you're looking at. If you want something small, portable, then you can travel with it. It's a fraction of the cost than something fully immersive where we replicate the complete field of view and provide the surrounding effect. But as a rule of thumb, we always tell our customers it's less than 10% of the real equipment. Of course, you need to consider, is it an STS you're comparing or a reach stacker? It will have a good impact. But at the same time, it also accelerates the return investment because the type of solution we can provide, you can have 10 to 20 pieces of equipment available on this. So if you have the complete yard equipment on the same platform, this will accelerate your return investment. Another aspect is if you can save one accident, you already have a return investment with a simulator. So that's an easy calculation. And on the side, there is the purchase of the simulator itself, but there is also the integration time. So you need to look at a company who can support you during that process, because at the end, you want to extract the most value from your investment. So you want to have a company that can support you during the integration and provide you the best practice and the best use of this training tool.
Thank you very much, Julien. I want to pivot now to a question for Mark. And Mark, you were speaking earlier about some of the benefits associated with using simulators within the context of the operator assessment process. Now, I wonder if you can help our audience assess the amplitude of savings generated by using simulation as part of that process.
Yes, numbers in our industry are usually very high numbers. An average revenue loss for one ship to shore becoming unavailable when it should have been in operation on a vessel is approximately $10,000 per hour, while we take into account all of the salaries and equipment behind the ship to shore. Normally, behind the ship to shore, you have 5 to 6 internal transport vehicle for the local transport, approximately 2 ASCs or RTG in the yard to stack these containers. So when we take all of this equipment waiting for a non or operative or very slow operated ship to shore, these numbers are adding up very quickly. So if we use the 20 to 25% productivity increase, which is our experience with simulator training versus standard training, so from 25 to 28 moves per hour to up to 32 to 35 moves per hour. This gives us an increase of the 20 to 25% that I'm talking about. This means less hour to service the vessel, as I said earlier, faster turnaround of the vessel, increased berth capacity. Same with the rail operation, the gate operation, which in the end improves the terminal capacity and throughput. Less operating hours on equipment, so longer lifetime for that equipment. Extended maintenance intervals. I mean, we're still doing the maintenance every 500 or 1,000 hours, but then these hours will come later in the calendar year, in the date. Reduction of operator hours on equipment. Salaries are normally fairly high in our industry. So again, it's difficult to put a number, and there are ways, and I've had done the calculation in the past that will be represented for terminals in general, because terminals are very different from one terminal to another, one region to another. But as I said, one of the exercises that was done very accurately with a lot of input at the time showed us that on a 5 million TEU terminal, 1 move per hour per equipment per 8-hour shift represented 400,000 euro at the end of the year. So that's quite a number. We're talking only 1 move per hour here.
And those are numbers that you're talking about in the context of operator assessment. There are also numbers or savings that result from the ramping up of operators faster.
Yeah.
How would a port terminal
or
training organization, how would they go about measuring those numbers?
Well, if we take into account that we ramp up 6 to 12 months faster on average for operators coming out of simulator training, at an improved productivity of 20%, because we are ramping up faster, but also have a better productivity from these simulator trained operator. This represents approximately 5 to 7 moves per hour, over 2,000 hours working hours for an operator in the year. So we're talking 10 to 14,000 moves per year for each new operator. You can make the math. To this, you can add an increased productivity by specific retraining of experienced operator. So even those that have not been trained originally via simulators, because they have been there for many years before the simulators were used, we can then have some specific retraining to improve or correct some behavior, which our experience is that on non-trained experienced operator, we can reach up to a 10% productivity improvement. And then, as I mentioned before, the savings is also seen in operating, the operating cost per box. So we're talking on a 1.5 to 2 million TEU terminal, easily $500,000 per year.
I think it's important to restate that these benefits are not just theoretical. We actually do have anonymized client data that points to some hard numbers regarding improvements in moves per hour. So my question would be for Julien, are you aware of some of these hard outcomes, and can you speak to the moves per hour improvements before and after simulation?
Correct. We have a lot of numbers from our customers, and as mentioned by Mark, the biggest impact is at the first section of the learning curve, when you become an operator and the early phase of the operations. So we've seen numbers like legacy training, people were doing 15 moves per hour, to people being trained on simulators that do 19 cycle times. So just this extra 4 containers per hour, I'll let you do the math. That's a lot of money at the end of the day. And the reason behind that, it's simple. With simulation, you remove the stress factor and you can learn at your own speed. And after that, re-include the stress factor on top of this. And you can take some risk when it's time to use the pendulum to control the container or to go faster. So that's something you can easily learn on simulators versus the real piece of equipment. Something mentioned by Mark also is the percentage of candidates that are passing on the real piece of equipment. Before that, the legacy training is 10 to 12%. With simulators, you're talking about 25 to 30%, which is good considering the low numbers of this. And something to consider, and we've seen this in the construction industry, some students or operators, they are learning at different speeds. Sometimes they are slower to acquire that skills. But with simulation, that can give you the extra time than with the real piece of equipment, it's not possible. So when they master that skill, you are sure they are performing with that. So with simulation, that's another flexibility you can bring to your training curriculum on this. And yeah, other numbers I can throw, definitely damage, accidents reduction. That's easy. You do all your mistake in the virtual world versus the real thing. And other numbers we've seen in terms of efficiency and performance, this one is more on break bulk materials equipment like a wheel loader and excavator. People were able to reduce 30 seconds their loading cycle of the wheel loader, which is a lot at the end of the day. It's tons of materials more in the same day. Just because you do a nice and smooth loading pattern, you learn also don't use the brake, use the shuttle operations to have smooth transition, etc. So this also reduce the wear and tear of the equipment. So again, virtual training, it's closer to real piece of equipment, and you can do all your tests on this before moving on the real machine.
Great, thank you, Julian. Now, before we pass to the Q&A portion of this webinar, I'd like to conclude the interview with two final questions that address a couple of the prevailing trends for today's port terminals. The first question is for Mark, and one of the important trends that terminals are investigating today is eco-sustainability. So I just wondered, do you see simulation playing a role there as well?
Yes, of course. The use of simulator for training reduces greatly the impact on emission. For example, ship to shore can use up to 300 kilowatt hour to operate. An RTG or ASC, yard equipment, up to 75 kilowatt hour or 20 liters per hour, because we still have lots of diesel RTG out there. This is for hundreds of training hours per operator. I'm not sure how much power a simulator consumes during training, but I'm sure it's far less than 75 to 300 kilowatt hour. And same thing, when we don't use the hours on an equipment for training, that means that the maintenance intervals can be a bit further, less used oil, used filter, and all of these things that we need to dispose of. So the impact on eco-sustainability is very important, and also the fact that the operators have a higher performance, more productivity, means also that less hours to service the same vessel, so less hours on the equipment, less emission and uses of energy. So all of that together has an important impact on the emission and our green planet.
Understood. Okay, for my final question, I want to ask both of you, Julian and Mark, to speak to a trend which not all port terminals are facing, but it certainly is an important trend within the industry, and it's automation. So, Julian, I wonder if you could first speak about simulation in the context of automation.
Smart port, I think, is the most common term they use in the industry, but automation itself, it's changing the responsibility of the operator in the port and future operators. So simulation is good to train and help people to do the port transition. If you pass from the real STS to a raw station, as an example, you want the operator to learn the difference, because it's not the same behavior. Even if it's the same machine, same functions and controls, it doesn't feel the same way. So raw simulators will be good. And to develop more into the automation sectors, PLC integration is also something very important. The real machine PLC, so how do you play with that interface to make sure it's efficient, you don't do any mistake in the setup of the machine, and how do you react according to the operator assist functions like the Antisway Mark, I think, was talking about. So that's something simulation can train operators. When do you react with those things?
Great, thank you. Mark, can I ask you for your take on the role of simulation in the context of automation?
Yes, of course. Automation does not mean no need for operators. In automation, there is a need for remote operation of the yard equipment for exception handling. 5 to 10% of the containers will need to be remotely handled by an operator behind an operating station. Ship-to-shore automation is still not there as we speak today. My opinion, when I talk to the various players in the industry, is we're still another 7 to 10 years before we have full automation on ship-to-shore. So the ship-to-shore right now, part of the cycle is automated, but there is still a need for a remote operator. And then, as Julien mentioned earlier, it's very important to have the simulator replicate the ship-to-shore or the yard equipment, the crane itself, as much as possible. That should be changed to. It's important that the simulator replicates the environment that the operator will operate in. So if the operator will operate on a crane itself, then it's important that the simulator replicates that environment. But if the operator will work in a remote from a remote operating station, then it's important that the simulator replicates the remote operating environment. And I even have a customer right now where we are early stage of discussion, and then we're even right now talking about that each remote operating station should also be a simulator. So we should, by the switch of the flick of a switch, go from operating an equipment in the yard to operating in simulation mode. And so instead of having one simulator and then 5 or 6 remote operating stations for an equipment, that we're looking at each remote operating station should also have the capability of a simulator. So this is where, so yes, automation will, is there still a need for simulator? Different type of simulator, different environment for the simulator, but there is still an important need for simulator, yes.
Great, thank you very much, Mark and Julien. Now that essentially concludes the interview segment of this broadcast. But before I pass the mic back to Paula to moderate the Q&A session, just want to say to our audience, if we do run out of time or if you have questions at a later date, you can feel free to contact CM Labs via our website at cm-labs.com. That's cm-labs.com. You can also find that hyperlink in the ebook, which is in the attachments section of the interface. Also, pardon me, you can also get in touch with Mark Desmonds directly at markcraneconsulting@gmail.com. That's markcraneconsulting@gmail.com. In any case, I believe that all attendees will receive an email after the webinar with a recording, and of course, this information will be there. I'll pass the microphone back to you now, Paula.
Great, thank you. What an insightful discussion. I love the questions and the answers from all of the panelists. I'd love to hear about the simulations, especially as the staff liaison to the facilities engineering committee. Very fascinating. We do have some questions. For those of you who haven't submitted any questions yet, you can submit. There are 2 ways that you can submit questions. If you have any questions that are burning, you can do that either via the chat box, or there's also a questions section where you can submit them. So there are a couple that came in. The first question that I see, is it possible to customize a simulator for different equipment or scenarios?
Yeah, I can take this one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Definitely, that's a service we offer. We understand for customers, it's important to have their own yard, their own cranes, their own equipment, their own controls. So that's something we offer. Depending the level of customization, that's something we can easily perform. Automation integration, we do a lot of projects like this to make sure we cover the training needs of our customers.
I had in the past on a small terminals where we had mobile harbor cranes, ship-to-shore cranes, and RTG. We had one simulator that was used for the 3 types of equipment by simply changing the console. So the console for the operator would be replica of the different equipment, the different software. But it is possible, in my experience, when there's on a small terminal and there's no need for 3 different simulators. We can have that into one simulator and still have quite a good replica of the environment for each type of equipment.
Okay, great. Here's another question that came in. Is it important for a simulator to replicate the terminal layout?
This one, it depends what the training needs. Most as possible, yes, you want to have that flexibility, but doesn't mean you won't. With that generic environment, you can understand all the operations the SCS operator will need to accomplish, etc. So it depends. But most of the time, yes, that's something we provide to our customers that are asking for this.
My experience that it's important on ship to shore and yard equipment, but it's a must on horizontal transport simulator, like a shuttle carrier simulator, when you're going to operate a vehicle that is moving throughout the yard and not stationary on rails. Then it's a must to have the replica of the terminal for that type of equipment. For the ship to shore, the ASCs, somehow a similarity could be sufficient, but horizontal transport vehicle, it's a must.
I would also add that I think a lot depends on the value that you're looking to extract from your simulator. Certainly from the training perspective, there are certain degrees of requirement to emulate the environment. But if you're looking to use the simulator for, let's say, community outreach, perhaps that requirement is lessened. Equally for the assessment of operators, it may not be as necessary as it is for the training.
Okay. Here's an interesting question. You were talking about automation. Will simulators ever replace trainers?
So far, I don't think it will never be the goal. It's to be a complement and enable the operator, the instructor, sorry, when it's time to teach. While looking to make his time more efficient on the real piece of equipment. So no, it's not the goal. It's really a complement, and we're trying to provide more tools to the instructor.
I also believe that there will always be a need for a teacher, so he can become more efficient and he can maybe train more than one trainee at a time. But there will always be a need for a trainer behind the simulator and the software.
Yeah, and this kind of goes along the same lines, I guess. Can you speak more to the impact of simulators on labor relations?
Well, my experience is that there is not really any negative impact on the relation by using simulators. On the contrary, I mean, we provide a safer environment for training, which in turn become a safer environment for people to work in as operators. Safer operators on equipment is also safer environment for working around the equipment. As we know, there are people working in the surrounding of the cranes and the equipment. And it does not reduce the amount of employees needed on when we're talking about simulation. It doesn't reduce the amount of employees needed to perform the work on a terminal. It means that it's a safer environment, better productivity, which is better for everybody. When a company is financially healthy, then it's good for its employees also. So I haven't seen any major impact on the relationship between the employees and the use of simulator.
I think at one point there was perhaps a misperception that faster training meant less training, but that's certainly not the case. What's happening, in fact, that it's value-added training, so that the time spent being trained is more effective.
And in different sectors, this one, it's more reliable to construction, but I can imagine we can do some parallel with a port. A company who invests in training usually is good for employee retention. So for port employees, that's the foundation of the company. So if you invest in their training, you will see the return investment on both sides. So it's important.
Okay. Another question that came in, do your simulators replicate the motion of the equipment as well?
I'll take this one. It depends what type of platform do you select. If you select the tabletop solution, the one that you can put in a travel case, there is no motion platform. But when you progress through the immersion of the platform itself. If you go for the IN as an example, yes, we have a motion platform with 3 degrees of freedom, which react accordingly to the machine itself. So you can feel the vibration when you lift a container, when you drive, when you stop abruptly, you will feel all those movements on the real machine. And motion cue, it's something very important for operators because they all feel the equipment, the one who has experience on the real piece of equipment.
Okay, and then the last question that I see here, can you add software to a simulator after it has been installed?
Yes, and that's the flexibility we want to provide and continue to grow in that direction. So you buy your platform, you think maybe 2, 3, 4 pieces of equipment is good for you. In future, you decide you want to add custom exercise, more functionality on your machine, or new equipment completely. That's something we can do, connect in distance, do remote installation. If you need a new set of controls, that's something we can provide because the way our platforms are designed, it's highly flexible and scalable. So without any tools, you can remove the control box itself. You can add a steering wheel, change the pedal box. So that's the type of flexibility we provide to our users.
Great. Those are the last of the questions that I see. David, Julianne, Mark, are there any final insights that you'd like to share before we conclude?
Certainly not from me. I want to thank you for inviting us to this session and for the opportunity to speak.
All right. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, David, Julianne, and Mark, for this very insightful discussion. I hope all of our attendees feel like you gained some helpful insights. Before you sign off, I hope that you'll hang in just for a few more minutes so I can share some upcoming events and promotions that we have that I think may interest you. I'm just going to share my screen real quick. Let me change the center to myself so I can show my screen here. And we have a webinar coming up from another member next week, Vector Corrosion Services, on February 23rd at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll be presenting on the rehabilitation of reinforced concrete port infrastructure that implements corrosion mitigation to improve a structure service. So stay tuned for that and join us for their presentation. Our first in-person event will be taking place at the end of next month. That's our legislative summit, Now We Build, from March 28th through the 31st in Washington, D.C. That event will be focusing on important topics for our port members, such as infrastructure, energy, digitalization, and next-gen technologies. Some of our key speakers will feature General Stan McChrystal, who is the former commander of the U.S. and international forces in Afghanistan. And we will be recognizing the Port Persons of the Year, Senators Bill Cassidy and Mark Warner. So take a look at our agenda to see more about the program for that event. We hope to see you there. And then our Finance and Administration Seminar will be taking place in April from the 5th to the 7th. We have our Facilities Engineering Seminar and Expo, April 12th through the 14th. That's in Savannah, Georgia. Our Marine Terminal Management Training and Executive Management Conference Seminar, that is for people who are planning on earning their professional port executive training certificate, and that is April 25th through the 29th. So if you are planning on earning your certification as a professional port executive, that program is taking place in April. The Smart Port Seminar is May 18th through the 20th. And that's an IT, a technology seminar. So if you're in technology, that's a really good seminar for technology in the ports. Shifting trade, that event is all about global trade in ports. June 15th through 16th, that's in Tampa, Florida. The Port Security Seminar and Expo, that's July 12th through the 14th. Our annual convention and expo in Orlando, Florida will be October 16th through the 19th. That's going to be an exciting event to get together the the whole port industry. Very much looking forward to that. We had a great turnout in Austin, and we're looking forward to a great turnout in Orlando. And we've already had early bird registrations open. We've got, I think, over 25 exhibitors already signed up for that. So if you're looking to sign up for that, you can already go ahead and register. And then our commissioner seminar, December 6th through the 8th. And then we have a mobile app. If you're looking to connect with our members, you can message other members within the app. You can find information about our events and receive news. Our news feed goes directly to the app, so you can stay connected to AAPA and what's going on within AAPA right in our mobile app. So you can download it. It's free and it's available to iOS and Android users. And then if you, like I said at the beginning of this program, if you're interested in hosting a webinar like this one, it's a member benefit. So if you are a member or if you want to be a member, please just reach out to me. My contact information is right here on the screen. My email address and my phone number are available. You can also find my contact information on the website. I'm also on LinkedIn. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I would love to speak with you and to help you. Or if you're a member and you just want to know how to get more benefit from your membership, more visibility, you want to learn how you can network better with our members, please reach out to me. I'm happy to help you do that. So that's it from me. We had a wonderful presentation today. Thank you so much for your time today and for your attention. I hope it benefited you and that you got some nuggets today from our presenters. Thank you again to David, Julianne, and Mark for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. I hope you join us next week for our next webinar on Wednesday, February 23rd at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.